Hello and welcome back to another update. The Russians have managed to push in the direction of Sverdlikovo in the Sucha direction in the Kursk region. The Russians have also managed to advance south of Pokrovsk in the northern and southern flanks of Kurakhove and in the direction of Velyka Novosilka, where they've managed to cut the town into two parts, encircling part of the Ukrainian forces entirely while keeping the other side operationally encircled. Starting out in the southern direction, the Russians have managed to completely encircled the forces of the Ukrainians south of Velyka Novosilka in between the Shaitanka and Mokryali river lines. This leaves the Ukrainians completely encircled, and their only way out is across a river line into Russian-held territory. Therefore, the Ukrainian forces here either will have to surrender or fight to the end, unless the Ukrainian forces to the north will be able to break this encirclement, which is very unlikely based on the recent trend of events in this section of the front line. The Ukrainian forces here south of Velyka Novosilka and the southern parts of the town are completely encircled, while the northern parts is operationally encircled with the Mokryali river line to the west. They are able to cross over the river line and onto the high ground where the fortified positions are present. However, there is no road present for the Ukrainians to make use of, and at the same time the Russian positions to the north and to the south have fire control over the entire crossing, which makes it extremely difficult for the Ukrainians to leave Velyka Novosilka, especially considering they'll have to cross over open fields with no forest lines, no cover at all for a withdrawal of their forces. The Russian forces in the central parts have geolocated some footage of them raising the flag of the Russian Federation within the town, which shows that it is only a matter of time before the Russians gain full control of it, both in terms of the operationally encircled forces in the north and the completely encircled forces in the south. With regards to this operation that achieved this, there is this footage here which shows a Russian armored convoy moving into Velyka Novosilka. There's not a lot of landmarks from this. We see that there's FPV drone fire, artillery fire towards these vehicles, but none of them are destroyed through this process, which allowed them to move into the central parts of Velyka Novosilka and drop off their infantry. And this also shows that the resistance of the Ukrainians is very limited. At the same time, we see this footage towards the end, where the drone that films the Russians planting the flag, we see that the northern parts and northeastern parts are largely silent. There's no smoke rising except for the northwestern parts of the town, which indicates that the Ukrainians are likely completely out of the town already, that either the ones who could escaped, and the ones who couldn't haven't, and have simply been defeated. In either case, the Battle of Velyka Novosilka is likely already over, and we're simply waiting for the news of the Russian capture of the town. With this, the situation changes drastically in this direction, because the Russians will start being able to use the town of Velyka Novosilka as an outpost, a stronghold, and a logistical hub for future offensive operations in the area, for further offensive operations towards the northern parts through Novye Kumar across the Mokryali river line and upwards towards the second line of defense, as well as flanking the first line of defense north of Velyka Novosilka. At the same time, launching operations towards the Zaporizhia region along the western flank of the fortified positions as well, which means following the capture of Velyka Novosilka, the battle will now be moving towards the Dnipro region here in the southwestern outskirts of the Donetsk region as well. We are already seeing the fighting going in that direction near Pokrovsk, the west of Sverdlikovo, and the trend is also being seen in the direction of Kurakhove, and now we'll be seeing it in Velyka Novosilka as well, where the Russians will be moving to gain full control over the southwestern outskirts of the Donetsk region and move into the western flank of Pokrovsk, with the siege there being the #1 priority for the Russian forces. Moving on to the next section of the front line, we see here to the west of Kurakhove, the Russians are moving towards Dashne, capturing the outskirts towards the town and not entering it, not gaining a foothold yet, but fighting over the outskirts of it in the eastern and northern parts of the town. The Russians are here moving towards the outskirts from the southeastern, eastern, and northeastern directions. Now, with these three flanks under attack, the Ukrainian positions in Dashne are hard pressed. The Russians here are looking to gain control over Dashna, which will lead to the remaining parts of the fortified positions being under Russian control, while the Russians will then move on to the fortified positions west of Dashna and finally towards Ulekli, gaining control over the entire Vovcha river line and the Sukhyali river line west of Kurakhove, which will allow the Russians to make use of Kurakhove as the main logistical supply hub for further offensive operations towards connecting the front line with Velyka Novosilka in the south and Kurakhove in the east before heading into the Dnipro region in the west. The Russians also continue their offensive operations south of Novosibirsk, where the Russians continue their flanking maneuvers around Novandrivka, attacking it from the northern, eastern, and southern directions. As I have been saying for the past two updates, the Russians will be attacking from the northern flank, closing the final route before pushing onwards towards Sripne along the forest lines to the south and from the northern flank as well. The Russians will also continue their offensive operations west of Novosibirsk as they move along the fortified positions and the towns in the northern flank as well. The Russians are here moving along two main axes, the fortified position R1 and the town 1, where they're looking to gain control of the areas of the Ukrainians within the Donetsk region in the western outskirts of it. The Russians continued offensive operations along the southwestern outskirts of the Donetsk region to reach the Dnipro region and gain control over the border area. The Russians are also moving onwards towards the southern flank of the Dashnik, capturing a significant fortified position of the Ukrainians and flanking the town from the southern direction. The Russians are here looking to bypass the town from the southern direction, gain control over the northern flank of the Solona River as they move further along the Solona River from the northern and southern banks to move onwards towards the Dnipropetrovsk border area. The Russians also managed to gain control over the remaining parts north of Kotlina. This allows the Russians to strengthen the northern flank of the operations west of Pokrovsk as they continue pushing towards Odashne and towards Pokrovsk itself. There's very heavy fighting here because the Ukrainians are attempting counterattacks to push the Russians away from the highway and to reopen the supply route for the city of Pokrovsk. However, so far they have been unsuccessful with doing so as the Russians continue expanding their zone of control and are withstanding the Ukrainian counterattacks. The Russians have also managed to advance in the Kursk region. Here we see some significant developments, where they have managed to reach the outskirts of Sverdlikovo with a push along the main highway, reaching the outskirts of the town, and the battle over the town has now begun. This is an attempt by the Russians to secure the border area along the Russo-Ukrainian border, as well as to gain control over Sverdlikovo, which is the final town in between the Russian positions and Sucha. It will also allow the Russians to move on towards Lebedivka and Luknia to the south to gain control over the riverline area and strengthen their western flank of Sucha for further offensive operations towards the town. The Russians were pushed out of the southern outskirts of Sucha with the Ukrainian counterattacks within Makhnovka, pushing them out of the town agglomeration. However, the Russians are now strengthening their western flank for a push from both the southern and northern flanks. This will allow the Russians to enter the town of Sucha and the surrounding towns and completely cut off the Ukrainian positions in the north and east of Sucha, encircling the Ukrainian grouping within the Kursk region. The Russians will also be able to bypass Sucha itself by moving along the border area between Russia and Ukraine. This will allow them to make use of the anti-tank ditches and the dragon teeth as a barrier between the Russian and Ukrainian forces, and to gain control over those fortified lines will allow them to have a strong flank towards the Ukrainian positions in the east, and with stronger pushes towards the Sumy region itself, gaining control over the border area will allow them to gain full control over the border area and then completely cut off all Ukrainian forces, including the ones located within Sucha and the surrounding towns, from their supplies and from reinforcements. The Russians have also advanced along the Luknia river line, attacking Nikolsky from the north and Viktorovka from the west, as they regain control over the forest lines west of Viktorovka, which they lost previously to Ukrainian counterattack. And with this, they're securing their hold over the southern bank of the Luknia river line, which goes all the way towards Luknia. This is to gain control over the southern area and push into the railways, which supplies Malaya Luknia as the main supply line, and potentially moving onwards towards the forest lines in the area and down towards Luknia from the rear to gain full control of the area with a combined push through Sverdlikovo, Lebedivka, and Luknia from the south, and Nikolsky, Viktorovka, and Luknia from the north. To combine the two forces will allow them to cut off the supply lines of the Ukrainian forces in the northern pocket here northwest of Sucha. So we see multiple operations that are possible from the recent Russian pushes here in the northwestern parts of the Ukrainian Kursk incursion. In conclusion, what we're seeing is that the Russians continued offensive operations in the northern and southern flanks of Sucha, attempting to kick the Ukrainians out of the Kursk region. However, the Ukrainians are putting up heavy resistance, significantly slowing down the Russian pushes by only allowing them for small offensive gains every so often, which has allowed the Ukrainians to hold on to their positions within the Kursk region for as long as they have. However, this has come at a high cost of the positions generally in Kursk being extremely vulnerable compared to their positions in the Donetsk region, for example, and at the cost of their positions in the Donetsk region falling at a faster rate than prior to the Ukrainian Kursk incursion due to the relocation of troops to that direction rather than controlling them and focusing them in the Donetsk region. Therefore, in conclusion, we see that the Ukrainians have made some success in the Kursk region. However, it has come at a heavy cost, and now the success is waning due to increased Russian pressure in the Kursk region. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon and YouTube membership for additional content. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.